So, hello everyone. Today we will have a presentation from Dr. Sivasubramaniam. He's a biomedical scientist with over 30 years experience in medical research. And apart from his scientific research, he has a keen interest in academic integrity and medical ethics. He was one of the founder members of INAI, European Network for Academic Integrity, and he is currently the head of biomedical and forensic science in the University of Derby, UK. So this presentation is targeted towards early or mid-career researchers that are mainly pursuing biomedical or medical careers. And he's happy to answer any questions at the end. I, who organized this webinar, my name is Sonia Bielova. I'm also going to check the chat so that I can help Shiva in answering these questions. So without further ado, Shiva, the floor is yours.
Welcome everyone. In this presentation, it's not a presentation, I try to run it as a workshop. So there are some questions for you so that you can answer them or probably at least think about answering them. So the title is Building Your Own Research Ethical Behavior in Medical Research. Because I'm from, my background is from medicine and biomedical sciences, I chose that heading, but most of it I'm going to talk about will fit in for any research as well. So let me start with the question. You don't have to answer it. I will tell you in a minute. What is research? I mean, this is the question I always ask to all the PhD students of mine and also the MRes students. And the real answer is that like Albert Einstein said a long time ago, if you knew what it was we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? So this is what I always tell our students, that when you start your research, you can be a research student, you can be a researcher. The reason you are starting the research, you don't know much about it. So therefore you are entirely dependent on the published resources or your supervisors or the experts in the field. So the problem is that if the reported documentations are wrong or they are flawed, or if your supervisor's conceptions are flawed, then your research will be doomed right from the beginning. So that is a concept you need to think about. So you need to think about independently and asking those questions, and then we will go through one by one in a minute. So this is, I mean, whenever you see this sign, that means I wanted you to answer answer my questions. So these are two questions I am putting forward. Those of you who are interested, you can answer it. Either share your thought or you can hold on your thought and then we can discuss it later. So I'm going to give you about, say, around 3 to 4 minutes or 5 minutes answering what is research ethics and what are the best practices. I just wanted to have a feel about what you know about research ethics so that I can tailor my workshop accordingly. So if you can write it in the chat. Unfortunately, because I'm using the PowerPoint, I think probably Sonia, if anybody has written, can you read it for me, please?
Yes, I'm going to read it for you. So please, you're very welcome to write your answers in the chat. And please choose all panelists and attendees when you write.
Again, there is no right or wrong answer, so don't worry about that. This is just to get a feel of what you know about it or how your interests are, so on and so forth. So I'm not expecting a right answer. There's no right answer as such. So think about your own research. I'm assuming that most of you are either doing the research or probably at the end of the research or complete the research. So just think about it and then write in a 2 or 3 sentence, what is research ethics or what are the best practices in research ethics. It's right. So what I do is, because nobody is willing or they are a bit shy, I will lead it myself. So the research ethics is all about.
There are some answers,
Oh,
Shiva.
okay, sorry.
Can I read them, please?
Yeah, please.
Okay, the first one is research ethics is when you want to ensure your research is conducted in a manner the other that does not harm anyone. That's one answer.
Yeah.
The other one is honesty and openness in reporting what was done and what was found, not withholding results.
I mean, I'm getting a bit worried now because they know better than me now. To be honest, I'm really pleased because they are actually thinking in the right terms. And then I also, from the second answer, I know that that person should be from medical research, the way the answer was said, or biomedical research. I don't know.
There are two more answers.
Right.
Here is the first one. Research ethics are some basic qualities that a researcher must have while, sorry, it just came, they're coming even more, they're really active now. A researcher must have while doing his research. It includes your own work and not contracted cheating.
Yeah.
Another one, trying to avoid bias in what you do and what you report. And another one, best practices are benchmark practices that are generally accepted by the masses. So you got the answer on the second question as well.
To be honest, if you put everything together, I mean, all those answers put together, that would be the perfect answers. But what I thought was, let us start from the very basic, but from the answers, I know that all of you are slightly advanced peers, students or researchers. But the basic is thinking about what your research is and thinking about what are the factors that might influence or your research might influence how your research, how you are going to carry out the research. Is there anything problematic or that will be harmful to anybody who is taking part, or even it can be an animal or it can be a human being or anything, or the fellow researcher who is sitting next to you doing research, and if you do some chemical analysis and there was a boom, he will be affected as well. So that is also thinking about research, what to do with your research. So if you think about all those things, then in the advanced nature, as you are already answered, that you think about the moral behavior, you think about the principles, you think about the ethical principle, how to conduct the ethics, ethical clearance, health and safety, risk assessment, all those things will happen. You have already answered those things. So I am assuming that you already know quite a bit about research ethics. And the best practices is just to think whether the research is really necessary before you start the research. I have seen real publication. I cannot even reveal them in a public meeting like this because there's nonsense. They have done some research, has no benefits for anyone, but they just do it for the sake of doing it and then published it. There are some examples. So first think about whether it is really necessary. Transparency. Transparency means whatever you do, anybody else who wanted to repeat it in some other environment, they should be able to repeat it. You shouldn't withheld anything. Good example is long time ago when we were PhD students, there is a tendency whenever I have a feeling that some of you can understand what I am talking, and probably all of you understand what I'm talking. When you do a PCR, you purposely hide your primers in publication so that nobody will repeat it. What's the point there? And some people, they purposely put a wrong primer to waste other people's study. Why? Because they only wanted to publish again and again and again. So it should be a transparency, and then first of all, think about the necessity, and it should be transparent, and it should be fair. And when we go through the presentation, you will come to know where the fairness is coming. And you ask yourself whether it is going to benefit. To be honest, most of us do research that is going to be beneficial to the, I mean, in my case, general public or the patients. In, say, for example, if you do psychology, then it might be indirectly helpful for the general public. And if you do history, that will give you an example from the past, what has happened. So I have seen publications like, in Mesopotamia, people have died of copper toxicity. Some people might ask the question, why? What's the point about it? But that is about learning from past. You might say, oh, what is there any necessity to do in the ancient time a research and then say that people have died of copper toxicity? Is it necessary? Yes, it is necessary. Then we can understand from the history what has happened to those people so that we learn from the old or the past mistakes. Right. So research misconduct, to be honest, we need to learn about the past lessons. There are serious research misconducts, and then I'm always twitchy to share these slides with you because it has happened, but even thinking about them or even talking about them makes me nervous. Everybody think about when I say serious research misconduct, many of you would think that, oh, the Nazi is going to talk about Nazi. Yes, I am going to talk about Nazi research a little bit, but actually, even before that, in America in 1932, it is still called Tuskegee syphilis study. What they have done, the American government funded research. Again, remember, it's 1932. I mean, even before I was born. But those days they didn't care about research, but research ethics. But that doesn't mean what they did is right. So what they did is they get hold of the Afro-Caribbean people who are affected or infected, sorry, not infected, they are affected by syphilis. And then they said, look, we are going to isolate you, quarantine you, and we are going to treat you. That's the main problem. Quarantine is fine. We are going to treat you, and therefore you come to our hospital. So they quarantine, but they didn't treat them. They just give some placebo tablets. And then the aim of the experiment was to understand the pathophysiology of syphilis. Just imagine the the people who more or less misbelieved that they are going to be treated. So that the old gentleman there is the remaining people who took the American government to the courts and won in only in 2004. So that is the first serious research misconduct. Then I'm not going to go into the details. Everybody has read about Nazi trials and how they ill-treated human being. And again, these are past, but we will say, oh yeah, as I said before, that it's 1932 and 1940. And at that time, the ethics is not a big issue, but it has continued even in 1990s and 2000, especially from a country where I am living now, the Bristol Royal Infirmary and Aldehay Hospital, they started collecting organs from the deceased children or adult without the consent from their relatives. Actually, the relative didn't even know that these organs has been removed. So these are, we need to learn from the past. Yes, we can't go back and change it. And then some of you might say that, what's the point talking about it? It has been done. But I'm not I'm not a propagandist, but I wanted you to learn from the past lesson. That's what I wanted you to learn. Then recent time, that is the serious one, but the recent time, look at this the graph here from 1997 to 2011. The number of published articles that has been retracted, mainly due to the misconduct, have increased and still increasing. Is mainly due to the suspected fraud or some error in the results, plagiarism, and duplication, publication. So that means they publish the same thing in 2 different journals. And then comes in 2014, it's slightly old, but in the 2014, that the NIH, the National Institute of Health in America, they said the problem is mainly due to the poor training. They're trying to put the blame to more or less to researchers like early career or mid-career researchers like you, or you have been not, they have not been trained. But my question is whether it is poor training or inappropriate training. The difference between poor training and inappropriate training is, poor training is, the person is not properly trained, but inappropriate training is you are forcefully or forcefully told this is the way to do it, or you don't have to do so many repeats, you don't have to use the real ingredients, instead of that you use water. Those kind of misconcept, it's more or less called inappropriate training. And the problem with that is, I don't know how many of you, please don't answer that. Probably 1 or 2 of you might come across this inappropriate training. Think about it. Then we move on to some more alarming statistics. To be honest, this was actually, this study was carried out in 2005, and they reported, they contacted so many researchers, mid-career and early career researchers, and they found out almost 1/3 of the scientists admit behaving bad. That means they have either done one of these 16 different categories of research misconduct. So I'm just telling you the problem we have in hand. There are reasons for that, because as academics, we are forced to publish. Without the publication, we can't progress. As PhD student, you are forced to publish, because if you publish well, then your viva will be easier. So there are external pressures, but that doesn't mean we should more or less not worry about the ethics. So this is again my question to do for you to do is, are we facing a scientific research crisis? That means misconduct. Just share your thoughts. Again, I have given you some data, but remember these data, the latest one is only 2014, so we are in 2020. But do you think, as new researchers or the new mid-career researchers, do you think that we are facing a scientific research crisis? Sorry, Sonia, I'm just pulling you down.
It's totally okay. You can perhaps, while they are answering your question, I think you already answered on that one, but perhaps you want to add something. The question was, do you think we are driven to conduct unnecessary research by the drive to produce publications for uh, our institute statistics at any cost?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, I can't, you know, I got the list, but I don't want to terrify you with the list. But in some cases, yeah, just because there is a, probably they all would have heard about the publish or peril kind of culture, because, you know, everybody is expected to publish. And because of that, I mean, I hear, I mean, the one thing I can tell you is that the good example is one experiment was carried out. The experiment is called rusty potatoes. So the aim of the experiment is to grow the potatoes and then feed them with rust to increase the iron content of the potatoes. I don't know how successful that was, but I heard that. I came to my review, and then I more or less said, you know, what is the point? You know, what is the necessity here? But the necessity was highlighted, that the iron deficiency and anemia, so on and so forth. I don't know whether it is accepted, because as a reviewer, we just send our comments, and then that's the end of it. So yes, up to a point, we are struggling. I mean, to be honest, you know, Sonia would know, and even others who I am closely working with, the one of the reason, not all the reason, I do it for my own satisfaction as well. The one of the reason I am doing pedagogic research is to make sure that my publications are right every year, because most of my people ask that, why are you doing pedagogic research? You are biomedical scientist. But I am expected to publish at least 6 papers per year. That is an unwritten law. I cannot publish 6 scientific papers per year. No one can, unless otherwise you go 10 or 15 postdocs. So, yes.
There are some answers to the question,
Yeah,
are we
sure.
facing a scientific research crisis? There is one crisis in the sense that there is too much and not necessarily quality research coming out. That was a question.
Yes.
There is another answer. I think that pressure to publish is a real problem. Just as there is pressure to give students good grades to improve our statistics, this is a new problem that didn't exist 20 to 30 years ago.
Yes, that's true. I mean, yeah, on Wednesday, I was giving a workshop to the teachers, and that is another problem, because the league table, teachers, they don't have time to spend with the students, correcting them, leading them to the academic integrity. And again, I'm slightly moving away from my topic, but if the student in the secondary level, they know academic integrity, they will do ethical research when they come to the final, when they come to the university, do research, because they have got the sound background at the secondary level. The teachers can't, they simply can't, because they don't have time because of the league table. Same is true here. We need to publish, and that culture needs to change. I mean, there are people who are now thinking that, you know, I mean, I don't know about what is the method of analyzing in research output in Sweden or other countries, but in UK it's called REF, Research Excellence Framework. The first thing they look is publication. What is the impact of your publication?
Yeah.
Then only the rest. That should change. Right.
There are some answers. We are maybe facing a scientific research crisis, but not only in a negative way, in the sense that there is more research awareness about the misconduct as well.
Yeah, that's true as well. Yes, exactly. I mean, what I meant by research crisis is that there are scientific misconducts. There are questionable research practices. I'm going to list something in my next couple of slides. Unethical publication practices, and then the reproducibility crisis is the most important problem we experience in scientific field, because some results cannot be reproduced. So that means there's something wrong. I'm not saying that they are purposely doing it. Not all the time they are purposely not doing it, but I have a feeling that they are missing something. I'll explain that a little bit further about the reproducibility crisis in a minute. And the main problem, any research, not only scientific research, any research have been self-regulated. That is the problem. So self-regulated means, there's an expectation to behave like professionals. But how many of us are behaving like professionals? So that is a question I don't know the answer, but whether we all are behaving like professionals, probably not. And then the time to get it right. So we don't, the other thing is, especially for the reproducibility crisis and everything, I think it's time for us. I think that's one of the reason I came up with idea of targeting the new researchers or early career and mid-career researchers. They can change because they have the, what I call, if they tell them that this is the way to do it, they will do it because they are new. So they need to be guided properly. So if you say that this is the proper way to do it, they will do it. Most of them, I'm not saying everybody, most of them will do it. That's the reason I am targeting the early career researchers and the mid-career researchers. So again, pardon me for doing the medical background misconducts, but it might be true for others as well. So these are the core research misconducts. Fabrication of data. That means you just make things up. And that means you got the data, but you manipulate it accordingly to get the statistical significance. I mean, at the end of the day, we are all after the p-value. If the p-value is 0.05, we are happy. So we are not bothered. Most of us are not bothered about the patient. We are bothered about the p-value. So it's the other p we need to worry, the patient, not the p-value. Then the falsification of data, that means they are just making data. Now you can use the computer to make data. So you can use Photoshop to make things. And the other problem is plagiarism. That is what we've been doing for the entire week, awareness about plagiarism and academic integrity. But these are linked. I don't want anybody to separate, okay, academic integrity is different from ethics. No, everything together. And that's one of the things I am proud to work with people like Sonia, Thomas, and Zeenath, is the fact that we are working as an European network of academic integrity, but we are looking at all those things. We are not just academic integrity. We are looking at policies. We are looking at ethics. We are looking at secondary school. So we are trying, because these are intermingled, and I don't think that we can only handle, okay, I am only do anti-plagiarism activities. I'm not bothered about the academic ethics. No, you can't. Right, we'll move. Yeah, the next question for the participant is just share your thoughts. What other misconducts, I put it in a slightly cunning way, what other misconduct you come across or you have done? Again, as I don't know your names and everything, so I'm not going to check it. So feel free.
Until they answer that question, I would just read another comment about the crisis. There might be false publications, which is also an answer to this, perhaps. But in the present pandemic, we are out of a proper treatment. I feel it is a crisis that is happening and many have lost their lives. If there is some sort of medicine that is put forth against this pandemic, it would be very beneficial. In this aspect, I feel that we are facing research crisis.
Yeah, yeah, that's true as
Yeah.
well. In two ways we are having research crisis. One is the misconducts. The other one is we are in a situation we need vaccine as soon as possible. But we are doing, because they are doing the research ethically, they can't deliver as soon as possible. I'm happy with that, sort of. As a scientist, I'm happy with that. But as a general public, they will say, I think my local newspaper person, he said, what are you guys doing? It's almost 1 year. Where is your antibodies? But they can't understand that. So yes, it is a crisis.
Yeah. There is a comment on your current question of other misconducts. I think that selective reporting of results is likely to be more common than
Yes.
plain fabrication or falsification of data. Researchers attempted to report findings where a difference was found and withhold results when no difference was found.
Exactly. Most of the answers actually already, but I'm going to show they have already touched about it. So I'm just going to show these are my generalization. That doesn't mean these are the entire list. This is only a generalization. I normally split them into, this is for my own sake or explanation purpose. I split them into laboratory related misconduct, publication related misconduct, and the reviewer bias based misconduct. So there are, to be honest, some of these words are actually given by the people who are actually using it. So let me explain what has happened. I actually interviewed certain individuals who are doing research in confidence, and then they come up with their own terms. They have given some names for what they are doing. For example, replicates without borders. What does it mean is they replicate as much as they can or as many times they can until it becomes statistically significant. You know that anything borderline significance, if you have more repeats, that will become statistically significant. Again, they are after the p-value. So what their justification is that now they are almost significant. Why can't we make it significant? That's what they are saying. And then some of them, they are using confirmed negative controls. That means they're just using water as negative control. They're not using anything else. And others, there's another term, universal positive control. That means they have only one positive control. Because that experiment is expensive, every time they repeat it, they don't use the positive control because it's expensive. Their justification is expensiveness, but that is not the real ethical way of conducting research. Ghost repeats, that means they only repeat 3 times without doing any calculation, but they they enter the results 6 times. That means they repeat each results twice and then enter it as statistical significant. Data mining, that is they're just manipulating the data. Image manipulation, that is the most common laboratory research related misconduct is image manipulating the results in such a way that nowadays you can actually quantify the color. And if you go to the Photoshop and reduce the color, then the quantification will be reduced as well. And selective user, one of you have already answered it. You selectively use the data that is suitable for your hypothesis. Ignoring contamination. One of my PhD students, she did actually a 6 months of project. Is partly due to my fault as well, because I didn't check her doing the project. 6 months of project with the contaminated cells without me reporting or checking with my postdoc, and ignoring health and safety regulation. Again, I put it as that is laboratory related misconduct, because that, yes, it is not related to research, but actually it is related to research, because health and safety is the most important thing. It is not directly related, but without that, you can't do the research. Then we will go to the publication related misconduct. Convenient ethical clearance. That means they didn't bother about the ethical clearance. They did the experiment. Luckily, they got interesting results. So they retrospectively apply for the ethical clearance once the research has completed. Selective use of data. Again, that can be done in the laboratory or in publication as well. And then these are the slightly different kind of misconduct. Maximizing mentorship privileges. That means I know there's a lab, there's an unwritten rule. Every time a PhD student publishes a paper, all the postdoc will automatically will become authors, whether they contributed or not. And authorship by demand. When I was doing my own research, I got this demand for a person from whom I bought an antibody. Just bought an antibody. He hasn't even given as a kind gift. I bought it, but he said, because I made this, you need to give the authorship. And then malpractices in grant selection. So sometimes the junior researchers, they've been sidelined. They won't put their names in the grant because their publication is not good. And the third one is entirely interesting for especially early career researchers. This happens. I just wanted to show you that this happens as well. Reviewer bias misconduct. That means for example, you have found something very interesting. You are submitting a paper, and that comes to me because I am the expert in the field. Fortunately, my research lab is also doing the same results, same experiment, got the same results. So you delay your review decision so that you can publish first, I can publish first, and then they will say, oh, either is good or bad. Then they can publish. This has happened. This has happened not to me, but happened in the past. And reciprocal reviewing. That means they purposely, two different researchers in the same field, they purposely don't collaborate. They do collaborate, but they don't write papers. But they purposely say, unfortunately, because of this, the number of publication has increased. Nowadays, the journals are asking for the authors to suggest reviewers. So they use each other. That means they accept all the time. And also indirect identification. To be honest, if it is, I will explain to you about what indirect identification, but even I have done that in the past. I am not doing anymore, but I have done the past, because when you write your introduction or your results, you just say, we have shown in 2014, blah, blah, blah. And then within bracket, the reference. If you go to the reference list, you know who the researchers are. Simple and straightforward. Right, so these are some of the common day-to-day misconducts. Let us move on. So, where to apply research ethics in a research? So, if you are a mid-career researcher, early career researcher will start from this yellow, but the mid-career researcher, you start from this red. So, you need to find funding. You got to develop a proposal. You got to submit the proposal and get it funded, set up the project, and there where the PhD students will start, or the early career researcher will start, manage the project, and close out the project. Out of all these different stages, where do you think the ethics apply? I'm just to I'll give you a clue. There is only one answer. For all other questions, you can answer differently, but this one, there's only one answer. That is my clue to you. Anyone?
In all steps.
Yes, I think I got the right people. I'm really thankful to Sonia. I mean, you found the right people to interact with them. Yes, it's each step you need to have research ethics and compliance. Simple and straightforward. Right. Before we go on to how I wanted you to behave, this is I put it in the quotation mark. Long time ago, just before the dinosaurs, sorry, just after the dinosaurs have vanished, I did a PhD. And this is the phrase I received from my PhD supervisor. PhD is not a 9 to 5 job. Right? That is true as well. I mean, I still believe that is true, but I won't force my students like to work, but I still believe that that is true. At the beginning of the project, supervisor knows everything or seems to know everything. You don't know anything. You know nothing, because that is the beginning of your project. But that doesn't mean he is right. He knows everything about his project, but that doesn't mean he is right. But as you go along during the project, you will learn more. You will every day you will learn more, because you are the one who is going to dirty your hand in the lab. And I always tell my student that if your lab coat is smelling, that means you are working hard. That is my more or less a joke for them. Or it's dirty, that means you are working hard. But my lab coat is always white, or sometimes I use yellow. It's always yellow. Why? Because I never been to lab. I just go there for once. But you always do the research, so you come to know more and more things, new and up-to-date things. At the end of your project, you know better than your supervisor. Remember that. Although just being polite, you can just keep quiet, but remember that my researchers, my postdocs, my PhD final year students, they know better than me because they have done the project. Remember that as well. So from now onwards, I'm going to guide you through the way I wanted you to think about research ethics. You got to inbuild the research ethics yourself. Yes, there might be some challenges, because you're going to challenge the funding body, you are going to challenge the supervisor, co-supervisor, or the postdocs who is looking after you. And just to start with, I'm not going to go into these details, because by this time, from your answers, I know that you would have already read and understood all these 17 or 18 pillars of research ethics. There's no point no point asking anybody what are the 18 pillars of research ethics if no one is abiding by that. My aim is for you to abide by that. So I'm going to go, this is how I separated research. Pre-laboratory brainstorming stage, that means even before you start, you think about your research. Normally it takes about 6 months. Then that will be linked to laboratory investigation stage. Then it will link to publication stage. Then finally the thesis defense stage. Some of you might be wondering why he put the publication stage before the thesis defense stage. Please bear the thought. I will explain to you why in a minute. You might not agree with me, but I will tell you why the publication stage comes before the thesis stage in my way of thinking. So pre-laboratory brainstorming stage, that is the most important stage. This is a planning stage for you. Read about the subject area, read about the methods. Remember, in research, all the methods, almost all the methods are flawed. You need to pick the right one, or you might do a hybrid method for yourself, because the research you are doing, the methods available may not be suitable. You need to have some additional extra step. Only you can understand that by doing and failing it. I know one of my PhD students, she spent about 18 months, more or less half of her PhD, to do or rectify a problem related to Western blotting. And then she herself cracked it. I couldn't help it. She herself cracked it. But it took about 18 months. But after 18 months, the results comes like mad, because she knew how to do the experiment. So the reproducibility is there. Everything was there. Prepare for the ethical approval. Remember, ethical approval should be obtained before the laboratory start. Before you start the pipetting, you need to get the approval in hand. And do the power calculation. Those of you who have done clinical research, they will know better than others about power calculation. That means in order to carry out a research, how many subject or how many animals or how many repeats you are needed to prove your theory. And then have a chat with the statistician first, how to statistically analyze it, because different methods has got, different research has need to use a different statistical analysis package. And then if possible, I'm not forcing you, if possible, write a Gantt chart about how you are going to progress. Remember, at the end of the day, you will find out you never follow the Gantt chart, because things goes wrong all the time. But at least if you have a Gantt chart in hand, at least you know where you are going or how fast you are going. Then have a good relationship with your supervisor. That is important. After all, he is the one who is going to pay you. So have a regular meeting with them. And if you can't, sometimes your supervisor will be really busy. If you can't email them or chat them or whatever, you tell them this is what I'm doing. That doesn't mean that you need to report everything. But if you are in doubt, contact them. Or if you can't find supervisor, then there should be an immediate laboratory supervisor or postdoc. The postdocs are marvelous people, because they knew what is happening in the lab, and they actually learn from making mistakes. Make use of them. And then, the most importantly, do the health and safety course, do the risk assessment, do the chemical analysis, make sure that you and people around you are always protected. This is at the pre-laboratory brainstorming stage. During the laboratory investigation, learn, but learn it the right way. Do not try to go to shortcuts. Sometimes others might say, instead of doing 3 repeats, you can get away with 2 repeats, so on and so forth. Don't listen to them. You get the power calculation. According to power calculation, you know how many repeats should be done. You follow that repeats. Do not get somebody tell you to do something else. Ask questions, challenge your laboratory guide. Why is that? I can remember during my PhD that I have collected about so many placental samples, and that is my last experiment. And just before the last step of that 3-day experiment, the fire alarm went off. And that means my entire things, I need to repeat it. I never even thought about coming and using that experiment in analysis. I just throw it away. I cried a lot. I cursed me a lot, but I just didn't use it. Repeat, always think about the outliers, because when you do an experiment, most of the results will cluster together. There will be one or two outside. And if it is one or two outside, I have done that as well. Always think, okay, that is only one, so we can just omit it. But just think or just repeat it and see why that outlier is coming. It might give you a story. It might tell you some flaws in your experimentation, or it might be interesting. So think about the outliers as well. And then that will lead to your reproducibility and other variables as well. Avoid manipulation, selective usage, or stealing. I don't have to tell you because you already knew about these things. Think about your own research integrity. You are doing, because at the end of the day, when you have done the viva, and when you, those days we have the bound copy, is almost most of the time is black book. When you have the black book, everybody cries. Everyone cries. I cried because this is my achievement. So do that achievement with integrity. Do not let others influence your own morals, your own ethics. Now, they come to the question some of you might have, that publishing before the thesis submission, because we are going to go into the publication stage in a minute, publishing before thesis submission or publishing after thesis submission, which one is the best? Sonia, time-wise, I'm okay, am I?
Yeah, it's fine and it's very interesting.
Yeah.
I have a comment about the outliers. Ignoring outliers that don't fit the hypothesis for spurious reasons is a very common misconduct.
Yes, exactly.
Across, yeah.
Exactly. And the other thing is, they are missing something interesting. The outliers will tell us something interesting.
Mm-hmm. I have some more comments that were before, but I think I'm going to save them for the end of your presentation. I have a comment about your question now, that this is an interesting question. Some publications are probably necessary before thesis submission because the feedback and response might provide clearer guidelines and pathways.
Exactly. I mean, I'm beginning to think to allowing the person who answered to lead it now, because he is actually doing what I wanted to tell. So I'm happy. I'm really happy. And that is the purpose of this activity, and it is working well. I'm really happy. So anybody who is saying after the thesis submission?
No, not yet.
Probably not, because he's already answered the right answer. Let me continue with that. Is that if you ask me, again, this is my own perception, and also at least one of you has agreed with that, is that you got only 3-year funding or maximum 4-year funding. So after the funding is end, whether even if you wanted to do something back, unless otherwise your supervisor is super rich, you cannot go back and do the experiment. So if you try to publish something before your thesis submission, the reviewers, the good reviewers are really nasty. Right? Every time I get a very nasty review, that means he is a neutral reviewer. He is thinking about everything. He's not saying, oh yeah, he's my friend, that's fine. No, he's asking all the rubbish questions, which some of them I can't even do. But some of them, they will expect you, have you done this experiment? How many repeat you have done? Why can't you check this? Then you can go back. If you submit before your thesis submission, you have time to go back to the lab. You got funding, you got money to eat, and do the experiment and make it better. But if you have submitted afterwards, you can't do that. You might have to rely upon the other student who is doing you or somebody else to do it, which is not going to happen because once you have submitted your PhD thesis, this is a financial problem because you need to eat. Your funding is gone. So everybody is more or less eager to go into postdocs. I know people have started their postdoc even before they finish their viva in a belief that they will get the PhD. And most of them, I mean, most of them means all of them got the PhD, but they need to live. So think about that. So publishing, always publishing before the thesis submission is better, in my point of view. Yes, sir.
There are two comments. The first person commented, but I do know supervisors who won't allow students to publish before thesis submissions. That's one comment. And the second one, publish when you are ready to publish. The submission should not affect when you publish.
Yes, in a way it's right. But if you're 100% sure that, you know, it will be more or less a minor revision rather than a major revision, that means asking you to redo the experiment, then it's fine. You can publish whenever you want. I mean, to be honest, you know, during the lockdown, I am trying to publish about 2 or 3 papers from very old data. But, and the problem is the first author has got the Gmail. So when you give the author's detail, everybody's email is university email, but the first author has got a Gmail as an email because she hasn't got any job yet. Yes, we can do that, but I would prefer to do the paper before the submission. Again, remember that, you know, like the first student asked, if the supervisor is a bit funny, not letting you, then it will be difficult for you. But there are ways out of it. I don't know. I think I am 100% sure that Sweden will be the same. In UK, you can confront supervisor through proper channels. You can complain about him. As long as you got a proper results to publish, you can complain about him that this guy is not letting me do it. So there are, you know, there are protective mechanism around. But remember that because this is an international forum, I am a bit careful because it might not be the case in every country. But most of the European countries, there are systems to challenge. So publication stage, again, report what the result shows, not what you think that it should be. Because we all have, I have read some papers that this drug does not have any effect to treat Parkinson's disease. I don't think that that particular person who published the paper would start at the experiment in the belief to prove that this drug doesn't have any effect against Parkinson's disease. His hypothesis would have been, I hope, is that drug have an effect on Parkinson's disease. He disproved himself, but he never bothered about it. He reported what he has found. And that is the way to do it. Yes, his entire hypothesis is down the drain, but he is reporting what the results is showing, not what he's thinking about showing. So that is the most important thing. Again, that I don't want to go through things, avoid plagiarism. You know that recycling the results in 2 different publications, and then some of you already knew what you mean by salami size slicing is you use a little bit of results in one paper, another set, another paper, and another set, another paper. That means you have 3 papers instead of 1 paper. It is the quality of the research that important, not the quantity. At the end of the day, we need to think about the public who are going to use that medication, you are going to use that advice, who are going to use that precautionary advice you are giving. So rather than slamicizing, if you can explain a good story in one publication, go for it. Be truthful. Don't manipulate results. Don't try to selectively use results, and don't try to steal as well. And accept the flow. And reviewers, they always be critical. Good reviewers, I have seen several good reviewers. They are always critical. They will find some faults. Some of them are very nasty in reporting, but others, they will write it in such a way and give you clues how to do it. Use those feedback and then try to improve it. And that's why I said, if you start to publish before the thesis, then that will help you. And then sometimes they will ask you to repeat it. Can you repeat this experiment, but without doing this, and see whether you are getting the results? So try to do that as well. So the reproducibility is the most important thing. Again, as reproducibility, how many repeats? That depends on the experiment. That actually depends on the experiment and what you are trying to prove. The overly repeating itself will screw the data, because that will actually, the more you repeat, the more p-value would be. And if it is underrepresented, that also affect your data as well. Think about that as well. And when you go to the publication, the publisher might say this, right? So luckily, he has not been asked to reproduce the experiment. Then you might have to go back to reproduce the experiment as well. The thesis defense stage. This is the most anxiety-ridden time of your research career. Don't be. Why? Because you are the expert in that research. You spend about 3 years, 24/7, working on that research. So you know better than, even probably better than your external examiner. So present your data like a story with confidence. I have witnessed several thesis defense or viva, where at the end of the viva, the student asked the external examiner, "Oh, has viva finished?" You know why he asked the question? Because he was utterly into this. He was telling his story, and the external examiner also, he's a fantastic person. He let him do the things and ask here and there the question. That's what the viva should be. Not always that happens. And again, this is the rule of the thumb. Again, it's a rule of a thumb. Don't think that it is entirely true, that if your viva is going beyond 3 hours, that means there's something wrong. Remember that as well. Answer the question with integrity. And again, there's no harm in saying, "Sorry, I don't know. I might have to check it." And most of the external examiner will allow you to check your thesis, because thesis is in front of you. And we are all human beings. So we tend to forget things. As long as you go and refresh your memory, you can answer the question. And defend with pride, because this is your data, this is your finding, this is your contribution to the medical science. So be proud of it. And then give the facts with the data supported by the background reading. That's the most important thing as well. And accept the shortcomings. Say that, "Oh, I couldn't do this because my funding round ran out, or my registration period has finished." Just tell, and then try to argue that if I had a chance, I will do this, this, and this. So again, So just by starting your research in the pre-laboratory stage, thinking the right questions, ethically sound question, you can follow through your research in such a way with ethics, without any flaws, and then every part of your research you will improve every year after year, and then at the end you will become a professional. Professional means not a doctor in front. You need to behave professionally as well. For that, you need to have an inbuilt ethics in you, and that is the reason we are spending our time. Remember, this is the real life defense. I am happy now I am on the other side of that road. Unfortunately, some of you will be here, right? And this is a good process because they are asking questions in such a way you to improve and make sure that you know what you are talking about. So just to summarize, and then we got a time we can have a chat. As far as the medical research, unfortunately, I'm only concentrating on the medical research now. These are the main pillars of ethical consideration. So especially if you are working with the patients, you need to get the informed consent, try to minimize the risk of harm to the participant, yourself, and other researchers, protect the anonymity and confidentiality. I heard some nurses talking to each other about a patient on a bus. That is not confidentiality, is it? They were talking nicely about them, but that should not happen in a public bus. Provide the right to withdraw. Again, remember, just because you need your power calculation wanted 3,000 subject, you cannot say, oh, you have already done most of the experiment, you can't go now. If they change, they can go whenever they want. Avoid deception. Don't say that if you take this drug, we are doing an experiment, the effect of drug to stop COVID infection. If you take this drug, it will stop. The reason you are doing it because you don't know. Tell the truth and explain about the side effects they might get. And respect the other's ideas and try to acknowledge them. That is the basis for everything. So again, the writing is on the wall. As Helen said, the ultimate goal of all research is not objectivity, but the truth. It is up to you. You are personally responsible to become more ethical than your predecessors. And that is how I thought of delivering this presentation or workshop or interaction. And I hope you all enjoyed it. I'd enjoyed it with your answers, definitely. I don't know whether you enjoyed it, that only you to decide that. Before I finish, I wanted to acknowledge certain people. Professor Mark Constantino is my dearest friend. He also given some data for this presentation. He's from University of Serbia. And all the members, including Sonia and Zenith, all the members in the Ethical Advisory Group of European Network of Academic Integrity. Further information or some of the information I used are from these different portals and papers. Now we can have a discussion. I'll just come out of it so that I know whether you got enough time. I think we got enough time.
So, Shiva, thank you so much for this.
Sharing, isn't it?
You can stop sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Hold on.
Thank you for this interesting talk. I invite all attendees to ask questions or give comments in the chat, and I can read some comments that we got previously that you didn't have the chance to answer yet. there was one comment. If researchers use water rather than a proper negative control, do they say that it is what they are doing? If they are, that is fine, but it shouldn't be accepted or published. But if they are pretending it is a proper control, it is fraud.
Yes, in a way it's yes, but proper negative control should be only lacking one variable. That is called the proper negative control anyway. Sorry, I come out of it, that's fine. So the proper negative control is the one that you have everything in it except one variable. And that's the variable you're trying to prove. So what's the point using water? That means there's nothing there. So I would say that despite the fact it is sometimes some of them are expensive, proper negative control should be proper, not the water. And then claiming some of them, they are getting away saying that we use water, but at least they need to show the negative controls have worked in. So for example, if they have about say 12 repeats, at least half of them has got real negative control, then they can get away with it. But ethically, no, I don't like it. But remember that everything is run by money here, isn't it? That's the problem.
So I have a question, because the system is really almost working against us because of how can we educate early career researchers when it is so tempting to cheat.
Yeah, and also not only tempting, but sometimes it is taught to them do it because of the pressures, because the postdoc is in pressure to get more publication. So he is pressurizing the PhD student do their results and do something shortcut. This is the problem. I mean, and that's the thing that, to be honest, there's a saying that, in my country, in my language, that, if you wanted to have a change, that you need to kill all the politicians who are above 50 years old.
Sounds a bit drastic.
Yeah, it's drastic. I know that. It's a funny thing, because, that the problem is that we are trying to change the culture, but some, what I call experienced researchers, I don't think they will come out that culture. That doesn't mean all the experienced researchers are doing it. Only very few, but they won't. And again, they got their own concept. That's the reason my title is saying that building your own ethics. You got to have your own ethics. I shouldn't do this because that is against the law. I mean, I hate telling the student that you shouldn't plagiarize, because if you plagiarize, that we will throw you out. That is not the real answer. The real answer is you shouldn't plagiarize, because I wanted you a good academic or good student.
Yeah, and you can't legislate everything.
Yeah.
There is a question here. We often get applications to ethics committee for research that we think is pointless, but does no harm and informs the subjects properly. Do you think that that should be a reason for an ethics committee to reject an application?
There should be a reason. I mean, let me explain to you one example. This is not for research, this is for teaching. So I use human subjects to study the blood flow. And normally in the second year, we explain to them about myocardial infarction, how the heart attack happens. So instead of subjecting them to have a heart attack, we use the arm muscles to show how it happens. So we occlude the arm blood flow for about 30 minutes. And that was rejected because they got a good reason for that, because the 30 minutes of occlusion will produce substances that will go, when the occlusion is removed, that will go back and then stop the heart. So that's a good what I call cause for rejecting it. So what I thought was I rewrote it, and I rewrote it in such a way that it will be 15 minutes, but the patient will be, sorry, not patient, the subject will be, or student, most of the time is a teaching. So it's most of the student will be completely checked all the time with the medical people, but within 15 minutes we will stop whether they will get the effect we wanted them to study or not. We will stop. And even for that, they said that it should be under control, and they expected the university medical team on hand while we are running the practicals. So yeah, they should have a proper justification for rejecting it. But having said that, remember that I'm not against that. Most of the ethical committees are not entirely made up of scientists. There will be a priest, there will be a local MP. I mean, I'm talking about, sorry, in UK. It might be the case in Sweden as well. There will be an MP, or there will be, these people are, in my point of view, they are good. I'm not a religious person, but the priest will ask the right question, because he will ask, oh, how is going to harm the person. Most of the time he asks the question without, so trying to understand, but that question make us understand, oh yeah, there's a problem there, because yeah.
The question, the person that has asked the question said, "You're talking about rejecting an application because it might cause harm. I'm asking about rejecting it just because it is of no use. It is unnecessary research."
Yes, they can.
On what grounds?
I purposely avoided telling this as this actually was published. I'm assuming that everybody in this conversation are over 18. So I'm going to tell you an example. It's a funny example. This is publication from somewhere in Europe, that they are saying that there's a disease called pregnancy-related disease called preeclampsia. So nobody knows the cause of the disease. So everybody, including myself, we are trying very hard to find what is the cause, and still we haven't found anything. But this paper says that if you do an oral sexual act, that will prevent preeclampsia. My question is, what is the use? Is it ethically right? Is it morally right? Who gave that ethical approval to conduct that kind of experiment? Can you see that? So if I were in the ethical committee, by the way, it has been published and they claim that it has got ethical approval, I wouldn't have allowed. What is the necessity of that? And it's morally, I mean, I always separate moral and ethics in two different things, because ethics is more or less external, the moral is internal, inbuilt. So in human moral terms, what is the point of doing that experiment?
Okay, the comment is, again, I think that's an example that could cause harm or distress rather than one that is unnecessary. Could you give us an example, please, in the chat, what you mean by unnecessary research?
I can think several of them, but it is not coming to my mind yet. But one of the things I told is about the rusty potatoes. There are so many ways to enhance your iron intake without doing that experiment. There's nothing harm done, no harm done, because it's only potatoes. But they are just feeding the potatoes with rust. And we don't know what are the harmful effects about that, what other nutrients in the rust being absorbed to the potatoes and then consumed by the human being.
I also think, is ethical advisory board right place to discuss whether it is this experiment is unnecessary or not?
Yeah.
Or is it the funding agency
Yeah.
who is not going probably to fund something that's...
With some funding agency, I think unfortunately we are allowed to apply for funding even before getting the ethical approval. We all can. But some funding agency, they ask the question. They will reject it in the belief, or we said they will say, we believe that this will not be accepted in the ethical committee, therefore we are rejecting.
Yeah, the person was very satisfied with your rusty potatoes experiment. It was a good example. There's another question. Shouldn't the researcher also claim the side effects of an experiment proposed if that person follows research ethics?
Yes, they should. They should say that these are the side effects of that as well. Good example is, I don't know how many of you do that. Even if you buy an over-the-counter, say paracetamol, Panadol, or I don't know how it is called, is a painkiller. And if anyone is actually open the package and read the data sheet, we call it data sheet, they will never ever take that tablet, because it will be listing all the side effects. And one of them is death. But they are obliged to say all the side effects.
I'm just asked. I'm going
you want to ask
to...
question. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think it's very interesting, and many of things you mentioned are not only applicable to the medical research, and of course I'm from the humanities. So usually we don't deal with patients. But there are so many things that are interesting, and it's always I think it's very good to have discussion with people in different fields, because you realize how different you are.
And that's one of the good thing about the ENA. We are all from different fields, but work as a team. So we learn from each other. To be honest, until I started doing research with you, I never knew even the term called thematic analysis. I only came to know when you people started talking about it. And I slightly sneaked in and then read, what is thematic analysis?
Yeah, I think it's very fruitful. And that's what I really like about INAI, that people from different areas, from different disciplines, are jointly working on enhancing academic integrity and research ethics in all fields.
One person asked about that, about the internet. Yes, do not trust the internet, because this is a good story about my current PhD student, and he have found something bit weird, but he said it has been proved. And then I said, can you bring the source? Because they are very good at finding the source. Bring the source, and the source is www.madscientist.com. So I said, he is a mad scientist, so you are going to trust him as a joke. So yeah, this internet, you can post anything. You can post anything as well. That's another problem. You got to be very careful, because it is, I always tell to my first year students that this is true as well. You can go and check it. If you put it in the Google, if you Google it, a frog hitting a man, you will find a photograph actually frog hitting a man. What are the chances of that happening in the real life? So all the rubbish is there.
Yeah, and it's very important to teach students. And I think it's our work, you mentioned that we work with secondary education. That's also a very important part of that, to teach
I was
young
a bit
people
disappointed with
about
the
that. Yeah.
ICAI because there's not many secondary teachers were there. Maybe because of the timing, I hope. But, you know, we need to start from the secondary education because, you know, this is my take, is that there's no difference between academic integrity and ethics. They are linked.
Oh, there is an example of unnecessary research that was proposed from a university in United Arab Emirates, that selling halal food there was a marketing gimmick. But that is a Muslim country, and all meat except pork coming in is automatically halal. So what was the comparison?
Yeah. But the worse than that is, I mean, I think one of my colleague, she was successful, especially that I don't know whether the how many Muslim countries know this, that a thing called meat speciation. So that means, you know, that we can analyze the meats and see what is the source, real source, and then most of the chicken has got pork in it. In her research, you know, she's one of my professors, and then the what you call supermarket chicken claim halal, they got pork in it.
So it's more complicated than in this case. Okay, I think it's time to wrap it up. Many people in the chat are really grateful for this great talk, and so am I. This webinar will be published at the academicintegrity.eu/webinar, and there you can also find the 3 webinars we had earlier this week. So please enjoy them. And I thank you so much on the part of European Network for Academic Integrity for this lovely talk.
And then thanks for the participant. They are marvelous. You know, they led me rather than me leading them. So it's good.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.